Dangle podcast with your hosts, Steve Dangle and Adam Wilde.
Welcome to another edition, and you know what? We got a lot to cover today. Ilya Brishgalov, who's going to be the captain in Ottawa, who's going to play goal for Canada in the Olympics, and a whole bunch of other things. But first...
I didn't know any of that.
Well, yeah, because...
I'm really happy.
Because I surprised Steve on all of this stuff. I'd like to welcome to the studio a really great guy, and also somebody who does a pretty cool job. It's David Alter from Sportsnet 590, The Fan.
Yeah.
Podcast,
no
man.
sound effects applause.
No, it was real.
It was real.
So, David, can you... First of all, the reason we're having you on today is we hope to have you on later in the season. You know,
Sure.
from time to we just want
you have to butter you up before you really get to the real favors. I get it. Yeah.
And we hear you're a really good softball player.
No, I'm actually not. Even though I did go 3 for 5 today, I was the only person who also struck out in 3-pitch softball.
Wow.
So one guy fouled out on this 3-pitch. I actually went sombrero, and I got the gears for it. But hey, baseball's never been my sport. I'm more of a guy who likes to do the sports where your heart actually races for a bit.
Well, and it'll
get into a cardio.
Now hold it.
It'll come to you.
Yeah. Well, exactly. You know, you just keep your stick on the ice, bat in the air. Keep your bat in the air. I do want to, before we jump into questions, Steve, I do want to establish, David, who are you? What do you do? If you're not in Toronto, you probably, you haven't heard of David Alter, but you will.
Yes, I'm a male, 31 years of age.
ASL, David. ASL.
Yeah, from
Hot.
Toronto. Yeah. Brings me back those days. Anyway, so I'm a reporter here for Sportsnet 590, The Fan, which is Canada's biggest and first all-sports radio station.
Whoa!
And I've been very fortunate to be with what used to be The Fan 590 since December of 2006. Mm-hmm. And then I did some from interning to producing reporting. And then in September of 2011, I took over as the full-time Maple Leafs reporter, which means I go on the road with the team and I cover pretty much every availability they do, no matter how ill I may feel. No, it's not true. Actually, I keep up pretty healthy. And then I cover all their availabilities. You get to know the players, but the most important thing is you are at everything. You are waking up early in the morning to get to every single thing that they do. So Maple Leaf fans, and they are the craziest. Case in point to my right,
Steve Dangle. The reason this podcast even exists.
Wants to know exactly what's going on, who's on a line with who, what does this mean, what does that mean? My head's about to explode. I kind of try and be a middleman therapy guy for that.
So if there's a person to talk Leafs, it's you.
Yeah, well...
There you go.
Yeah, well, I try, and I enjoy it, and for the most part, I'm right. I don't always get it right, but for the most part,
you get it right.
Correct.
You've broken some stuff.
Yeah, it's been some fun, even when you break stuff, you kind of get worried because there's so much pressure when it comes to this kind of job that if you break something, and even if you're sure, your heart still pounds when you actually write it out on Twitter, especially if you're the first one to get it out, because even though you're relying on your source, you never know what kind of thing could happen that can totally change that, and then you could just get fried. And it's not like it hasn't happened, but luckily it hasn't happened. Beyond the first couple of months of my actual holding the job. But yes, it can get quite stressful, and you have bosses and everybody, trying to make sure that you are competing with people who are there, who have been there longer. You have to try and find different angles for things. It's stressful, but it's incredibly rewarding when you do get it right, and it's a lot of fun.
But in your time here at Sportsnet Radio / The Fan 590, you've had some pretty supportive interns under your wing. Particularly a few years ago. And
whatever happened to that guy?
Whatever, I don't know. I think he hangs out with Rob Ford.
Does he still go to the zoo? Does he still work at the zoo?
No, his fiance does.
Oh, okay. There you go. Yeah. But I do know.
I almost went back.
I do know that because one of my best friends who works over at OTR is lives right next to you, right in that area, the old Port Union in Lawrence.
Yeah,
I'm not going to give the exact address. No, I won't give the exact address.
I was about to say Jesus. Everyone Google Streets Views my house.
Yeah, you actually saw the car?
No, okay. No one was home. But I've had stuff mailed to my house from fans, and I didn't give them my address.
Oh wow! Okay. Sorry, I should have been better about
that. No.
I was the one who gave them.
You're the Sportsnet Radio guy, the big guy.
So, David, I got to ask: when you're out on the road all the time, and you're covering the Leafs all the time, do you get to know the players really well, or is it kind of like they're behind this glass fake glass ceiling and you don't get to, you only get them a little bit, or?
You know what? The circumstances do change based on whatever it is. The first year it was very tough because I was still the new guy on the block and still trying to get acquainted and just, get the job done. Then with more support in the second season, you start to get to know a lot of the players a little bit better. And when you're on the road all the time, they see your face every day, so they kind of get to know you. Some still are very good at putting up a protective wall, and I'm sure they're told that, especially in this market when they come here, because there is so much that is at stake no matter what they say or do. I don't blame them in any regard, but some do a better job of coming off as genuine in when they talk to you as opposed to others, and will make time for you. One of the better trips actually was the game after the Leafs clinched the playoff spot last season, because they had 4 straight days between games, which they hadn't had all year because of how compressed the shortened season was. The pressure was off, and we're pretty much staying in the same hotel as the players. And that was probably the best, where you actually got to run into them in the hotel, chat, see what's going on, not have the mic in their face. I try to not put a mic. I try to put iPhone in their face and try to make it look like it's a less intimidating factor, because, you want to have it as if it's a regular chat with your boys or something like that. Granted, you're not going to always get the good stuff on record, because they know the littlest things can be misinterpreted. But if you're honest with the guys, if you are, about to put out something, an article or something where you got to criticize the guys, you can be honest with them and say, look, I'm writing about this, but I want your opinion on it. I'm not going to write this without your say or what you feel. And usually, if they know that, they're usually pretty good about it. A lot of the players do get it. I do think, before that, I used to cover a lot of sports, and I think the hockey players are probably some of the nicest guys you'll ever interview amongst the major sports, in terms of just the way they grew up, their upbringing, their way of just greeting people and not being all about themselves, very much as a team vibe, and a lot of guys are very honest and upfront with you.
You ever have a guy just go, well, write what you're going to write then?
No, I've never had that, but I've had heated situations with I don't want to say who.
You don't have to say who.
Okay,
you don't have to say who.
I don't want to say who, but there was a situation where this year was the first year that both us and TSN kind of shared the rights for radio play-by-play. So one of the first few games, I was doing the first intermission interview, and a player who gives interviews but doesn't necessarily always want to give interviews, I requested him because he had a good period. I thought it would be good, try to change it up every time we get a guest. And so at that point, he's like, well, I can do it. I can't do it. I got to go. Okay, we could do it right now. And so he runs up, and then at that point, they're having a hard time throwing to me. They're not going right away, and I'm yelling down the mic, we gotta go. And
this is live radio, right?
I'm not on the air, but I'm talking with the producer who's in charge upstairs with live radio. I'm like, I've got the guest, but he wants to go right now. Just cut him off. Let's go. And then they were having a hard time throwing. I'm like, you know what? Forget it. He's gone, because at that point the player yelled, "Are we going or what?"
Wow.
And at that point, I just said, "Go." At that
not
point.
worth it.
Well, no, I don't want him being upset at me if he's already, I don't take personal offense to it. It's the middle of the action. Some people are different with their, there's some players who refuse to take first period interviews or second period interviews at all. Like, it's just, everyone has their nuances and tendencies based on how they feel they can do it. But that was probably one of the more heated situations, and it's since been rectified.
Now, I got to say, and Stephen backed me up on this, because we used to sit in our high school ancient civilizations class and talk about how we want to do a sports show together when we grew up. And, one of the jobs that we both talked about that we wanted to do in our career, and now knowing what I know, I'm so glad that it's not my job and it is your job, is following the Leafs and going on the road with them. And
it's like watching sausages being made.
Yeah. Exactly. You never want to eat them anymore. Yeah. And it's you know what, David, it's
I still want to make them.
Well, you're Italian, it's different.
No, yeah, that's true.
But no, in all honesty though, I mean, that it seems like a dream job. It seems like you wake up every day and you just think Leafs all day. And you know what? All we want to do is think Leafs all day, but we have boring, mundane jobs, and we have to think about about that, and the Leafs are kind of an escape for people. But for you,
that there's no escape of the Leafs.
Yeah.
Like that's my escape. My escape is someone else's.
Their escape is your job.
Is my job, and then my escape becomes totally opposite things.
And you grew up here in Toronto?
Yeah, born and raised.
So you're a Leafs fan.
Yep.
Originally. Now you have to be a little bit more objective. How has that change happened for you? Are you still a fan? Are you still allowed to be a fan? Do you enjoy hockey the same way?
I do enjoy hockey the same way. I can't say I'm a fan as I was before. And I don't even know if that's necessarily the product of the job or maybe how I was feeling in that 8 years of not making the playoffs. I don't know exactly
9,
where.
But who's counting?
Well, right. 8 full seasons, 9 with the lockout. That was always that numerical math that always eluded me. Some people don't like to count the lockout year because no one made the playoffs.
I had the scratches on my wall like in prison.
Yeah.
Brutal.
I don't know where it happened. I don't know where it happened. I shared the story before. I'll share it later on as well. But I got to that point where I took the job and I knew I couldn't be a fan. I just felt that if I'm going to do this job the way I'd like it to, I can not cheer in the physical sense, but mentally cheer for either or equally based on different elements, positive or negative, that come with the job. And that sounds kind of crass, but it's the truth. If the season ends shorter, the grind is a little bit shorter. There are always storylines about what happened, why did this happen, and from a writer, journalist, broadcaster's point of view, it's fodder, it's topic of conversation, it's stuff we can do, it's easy in that respect. At the same time, the fan in me was kind of rekindled during that playoff run because I remembered what that was like. I was there as a fan the last playoff game before that in 2004 against Carolina when... who was that? Oh, no,
that was
Carolina
Roenick.
2002, pardon me. Philadelphia 04.
Flyers Roenick.
I was at both of those game sixes, the semifinal in 02 and the second rounder in 04.
You were at the semifinal game in 02?
I was at both. I was at both of those. I was at both of those with Jelena in 02 and then Jeremy Roenick in 04.
When the Leafs were completely depleted.
And you wrote them off. You wrote them off in the third period, and then they came back to force OT.
Bless you, boys! What a game!
Just to lift you up and then set you back down.
Well, it's a Leafs fan.
But the point is, I was rekindled. I liked the energy that was in the city. I felt great for the city. Just looking at the shots of Maple Leaf Square and seeing the pride, the fact that what I'm doing for that 2 weeks is not just covering the Leafs, it's covering a big Toronto story.
Right.
Because that's what you live for in that respect. And for that, I kind of wanted it to keep going.
Oh.
So, I have reasons one way or another that makes me feel impartial in the situation.
Okay. And during the playoffs, it truly, you said it right there. It's like being a kid again. It was like watching Cujo again.
I forgot. I forgot what it was like.
And I get goosebumps still, thinking about it. And it was so funny because producer Chris is not on microphone, but he's in the studio right now. And I thought it was funny because we all flipped out about being in round one. And Vancouver fans are like, yeah, we're in round one. Call me when you're in round two.
So what?
So effing what?
Who cares?
and I just kind of, I thought, so different between the two cities. But Vancouver fans have been spoiled and we've been starved. And as far as the team went, that was one of the biggest stories really of 2013, and we only were in the first round. Really, it's amazing.
What was your? Oh no,
Sorry.
You got something, Chris?
As a Canuck fan, being in Toronto for the first time when they made the playoffs, it was cool. There's nothing like being in a Canadian city when they make the playoffs.
Yeah.
There's nothing like it. And I'm not a Leaf fan. I'm actively not a Leaf fan, and I really enjoyed that first round. I couldn't get enough. I watched every game, and I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. And I don't like the Leafs. It's just, but that's the hockey fan in me.
That's
right?
because he's Judas, and he still likes the Bruins, even though they beat
Judas.
Hashtag Judas. Now, go ahead, Steve.
What was your favorite moment of the playoff run? I'm trying to figure out what mine is. I think it might be the final 30 seconds of Game 6 and realizing, holy crap, there's actually going to be a Game 7.
Yeah. My favorite moment was...
Or what was the most exciting to cover?
Oh, the most exciting to cover was the collapse. I hate to say it. It really was.
Yeah.
I hated it, felt conflicted, felt a whole bunch of different things, shock.
Well, it made your job much harder, too.
Well, it did. It very much did, but then the story just kind of wrote itself at that point.
That's true, too.
Yeah, everything you worked towards kind of was destroyed, but at that point, it was a reverberation effect that still really hasn't healed in a lot of respects. I mean, no one's thinking about it right now because we're in the dead of August, but once training camp opens up, people are going to be bringing that right back up.
Well, and I want to ask you about that because Steve knows what it's like to report on a game. I have no idea what it's like, but I dated somebody who used to report on games and that sort of thing. So I know kind of how it comes together over the course of a game.
Yeah.
But break it down in Game 7 because, Steve, you made a quick aside to delete. It was 4-1.
Yeah.
Where were you at in writing your story? At the second intermission, where are you at?
So I pretty much have my blog because I'm luckily, as broadcasts, I'm not deadline writers. So the deadline writers are the ones who have to have their first draft for the paper all set by Horn. I already have Kessel slays the dragons of whatever, Kessel beats the Boston curse or whatever it was. I had a whole bunch of different things written up. This team is playing with house money, everything leading up to it. Pretty much a follow-up to what I wrote leading into Game 7, which was no matter what happens, the Leafs have measured up well.
Playing with house money is a great way to put it.
That's a good line.
Yeah.
I love that.
So I'm a big poker player. So I usually, even watching tennis yesterday, when one guy was starting to lose it, I said this guy was on tilt. So there's all different kinds of poker terminology, sadly, that I like to compare life to. But so what happened was in that situation, everything's kind of written up. Nazem Kadri scores, makes it 4-1. And
we're gonna have to relive this, by the way.
We're in that last
was.
TV timeout, and it's actually a little bit before that. And having been to TD Garden for 3 previous games in that series, and how busy it gets in terms of the broadcast media trying to line up just outside the room, I leave early to go downstairs to get my position to help Sportsnet and to get my position right up there. And so we're watching in a little holding room, and unfortunately, the monitor we're watching is 7 seconds behind the actual play because it's on delay. It's the broadcast one. So we see it's 4-2. No one thinks anything of it. Then it becomes 4-3. We can hear the horns before we see what's going on. We're like, oh, they scored. And then everyone's heads tilting and looking at the monitors like, oh boy, this is getting close now. And then as soon as we heard the horn again, we're like, no
way.
Everyone, about 5 or 6 of us Toronto media that were there that had already left early to go downstairs are just staring each other in the faces like, what the F is going on here? What is happening? At the same time, I was like, why am I not all that surprised?
And why were you not? Why were you not all that surprised?
Well, it just seemed like everything that, if the Leafs were going to... Just everything that seems to go bad with the Leafs can at some point or another throughout the course of the last 8 or 9 years.
When the 4-2 goal went in, I was like, let's go home.
The 4-2 one wasn't even the one that was for me the real warning bell. The 4-3 one was for me because as soon as the goalie was pulled, they were just on their heels because they were still playing. I guess the basketball equivalent of full court pressure hockey up until that point. But as soon as the goalie was gone, right back on their heels, you can't move Chara, and that was it. But at that point, I'll just never forget it. I'll never forget the look on people's faces, who I was around in that situation, and how historic that was, and just the reaction. I remember asking Phil Kessel in the locker room right after. Was like, can you take any? I know it's early, but can you take any satisfaction from what you guys done this year? And he's like, all he could think about was the game. He was frozen in that moment of time. He's like, it was 4-1. You can't lose that game. Mm-hmm. That's it. Mm-hmm. And stats show no one ever has in that situation.
Yeah, that was a historic.
It was a historic collapse. Historic Game 7, 3-goal lead in a third period collapse. Never happened.
So what we have to hope for going into next year is it's darkest before the dawn.
It was, But
how many more times?
How many more times?
You know what? It's going to be like right now we're talking about it, but it's not going to be talked about again until training camp. Training camp will come back. We'll come back that first game against Boston. certainly will be brought up then, and it'll be brought up the first playoff game after for the Maple Leafs, whether it's this year or the year after or whatever, after that happens, because of it happening. One thing we know, Toronto media, we are tenacious. We ask those questions. They may not want to hear, but we'll ask them.
Dicks, I think,
they'll
is
be
the
like,
word.
Dicks. Dicks is one of them. And Phil's reaction always like, why do you keep asking that? I'm like, well, you know what? It's going to be asked until you've done something to erase that moment.
Yes, yeah.
And that's just the way it is. I mean, now there's not going to be any more thank you Kessel chants in Boston anymore, and that's not going to be a topic anymore because in that series, Phil Kessel outplayed Tyler Seguin.
And Seguin's gone.
And Seguin's gone, and it's not going to happen in Dallas, I can assure you that.
I want to ask you a quick question
It'd be
about...
funny if it did.
Yeah, well, I want to ask you about Tyler Seguin. Now, we heard that he had a security guard assigned to his room to keep him from partying.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about that?
Unfortunately, I don't know the full details of that, if that's true or not, primarily because I'm just not in that marketplace and tapped into who might know that. But that would not surprise me given what I've heard from people there about his behavior. And
wow.
And I got to meet him and talk to him at length, just privately, at the All-Star game in Ottawa. So I got to see him in his... You know, at that point, you chalk it up to a young guy. It's the All-Star weekend. You know, anything you see there, you can't really chalk it up to anything. But, I mean,
it's
if
not
that
indicative,
behavior's every day, yeah, it might become a concern. But it's just hard to know if that is necessarily every day. But I can see the tough situation it would be in for him, too, just given his age and given how old the rest of the team is, too. That's very tough if you don't have anyone taking you under your wing like that.
When the GM trades a player who's making $6 million at 21 years old, who's, you know, so full of potential,
yeah,
there has to be a problem.
He's going to make Boston eat guff.
Problem?
Yeah, he is.
I really think so.
But yes and no. I mean, like at that point, you're keeping most of your core together. This was a tough year for the cap, and you had to make decisions. Now, I know you're going to say, well, they found room for Jarome Iginla in that kind of salary. They did, but they didn't because he's over 35. I think it's some $4.8 million of his salary is going to count against next year's cap, not this year's. Mm-hmm. So that's where you're kind of trading off there, and you're still getting a talented guy, even though he's kind of beyond his prime. But the point is, they had to make a decision in that respect. You're keeping core guys there, and no matter how good your core is, teams that repeatedly make the finals have to make those kind of changes. And for what he provided in the playoffs and all the other questions, quote unquote, whether they were true or not, it was the easiest decision for them to make in order to maintain their cap and keep their core together.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up Iginla because Boston has some good leaders on them, but don't you think Iginla would have had a positive effect on a guy like that?
I think he would have, but I mean, if you go down who they kept and who they didn't, who would you get rid of?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Like, who would you get rid of to kind of fit under the cap? You can only count Jarome Iginla right now as a $1.2 million contract for this year because 4.8 of it's going to go the following year. Wow. So that's easy. That is easy just because Boston found what is kind of a semi-loophole in that respect. Because you can't do that with younger guys. But you can do it in the signing bonuses with anyone 35 or older, and that's exactly what they found there. Rask gets an extension.
A big extension.
A big extension. Same with Bergeron. There's no room. There's just no room for any of these other guys. And so Tyler Seguin falls through the cracks. And you're going to see that in other teams where there's high-priced guys, but they're going to have to make that decision. Edmonton, I'm looking in your direction because when all those guys mature, they're not going to be able to keep everybody. That's for sure.
Well, and it's extra concerning for them because it's one thing if you're a team on the brink of winning a cup.
Yes.
Yeah, they still haven't made the playoffs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, they've got the talent, just if we're going to talk about Edmonton quickly, they got the talent to go out and get the goaltender that they need. And they continue to refuse to go out and get the goaltender that they need.
They're hoping it's Dubnyk.
Well,
it might be Dubnyk.
It may.
Their defense has been pretty bad.
But, I mean, you've seen him play, David? I mean...
Yeah, I've seen... You know what? I like to think that they don't want to throw someone in a bad situation because, look, if you do put someone experienced in there, you have to hope for someone who, A, is going to take some sort of pay cut, and B, not going to feel like going to Edmonton is, A, a situation a city he doesn't want to go to. I hate to say it. Mm-hmm. Or B, or B, a goalie that just doesn't want to get hung out to dry and have his value go down because the defense in front of him's that weak.
Right.
No, and I'm serious about that. You can put
absolutely.
You can put a tweener like Dubnyk in that spot right now because it's up to him to prove because Edmonton's giving him the shot and that's the way he's going to see it. If you put in someone with a veteran presence there,
like a Luongo, which almost happened.
Yeah,
allegedly.
Allegedly. That's right.
Yeah,
Or Schneider.
Or Schneider.
whoever.
I think the Schneider one was even closer, but Edmonton didn't want to give the price to be traded within the division, which I think is kind of silly if that's true, but either or. I think you can't put someone in that situation where Dubnyk, you can easily, he's seeing it as he's getting the opportunity. Anyone in that position is going to see it that way. The veteran guys are not going to. The veteran guys are going to want a better, stable defense, or at least a system in front. Maybe with Dallas it might happen, but they want more stability on the D before you get someone established there, because they don't want to go down and have their career go south.
Getting back to the Leafs for a moment,
Yes.
you were talking about your, relationship with certain players and seeing them every day. One talent you have that I'm sure a lot of reporters don't is you can actually speak to the Russian players because you speak Russian.
Yes, my parents were from the former Soviet Union, so they went to a couple of countries before they moved to Canada, like 4 months before I was born. So I was born in Canada.
Okay.
But my parents' main language, primary language to themselves, is Russian. And when I wanted to speak to my grandparents when they came to Canada, I couldn't speak to them in English. So I kind of had Russian kind of thrust on me as a first language, then it broke, and now it's not nearly what it used to be. But in terms of regular communication, it's okay. The only thing I have to learn from my parents right now is how do you say end zone, or the hockey terminology that I would never use in the household growing up. But when Mikhail Grabovski was around, it was an asset. Leo Komarov, it was the best with him. It was the best with him because that guy is hilarious.
He is really, really,
Yes.
really funny.
God damn, I'm going to miss him so much.
I'm going to miss him.
He's
a lot.
hilarious, and if you know the situation, it's an easy one for him to understand. He was going to make a lot more money in the K. In the NHL, he was going to be squeezed under the cap. He knew that. I think he's going to come back in a year or two and be a good, respectable player in the NHL. I think he did want to come back. Toronto,
They just couldn't afford him.
Toronto, he gave me mixed ideas in terms of if he liked the city or not, because I remember talking to him in Winnipeg. He felt more comfortable in a city like Winnipeg than he did in Toronto, because it reminded him more of Finland.
That's right,
So-
which is where he called home.
Yeah, so I think it's tough. Like, I do think he will come back. He'll have his pick of the litter the following year because he'll be a UFA as opposed to this year where he was an RFA. So it just made fiscal sense where he could make, I don't know, something like $4 million tax-free to play for his KHL team.
He's making that much?
Somewhere around those lines.
Whoa, I didn't think it was that much.
Tax-free, it's about there.
Wow.
Where here it would be taxed and would have been in the 1-something lows. And even then, they don't have cap room for him anyway. That's a
right.
whole other issue.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to talk to you about that, but I
Yeah.
mean that rapport that you develop with the players, especially the Russian guys who are so far away from home, that must be so refreshing for them. It must be like, I
Yes
can finally
and no, because they know this market's kind of crazy, but some will still put the guard up because they feel that their way of communicating around with no one understanding is now gone.
Oh, yeah, because they can tell you to F off in Russian, and most people wouldn't know what that means.
I'll give you an excellent
do.
example.
Okay.
I'll give you an
That's about
excellent
it.
example of this. So when I wasn't the full-time Leaf reporter, but I was still covering as the second reporter at games or filling in for the main reporter, I would come in and I would fill in because the other reporter was on the road or something, and Alexei Ponikarovsky and Nick Antropov, and I'm brand new, are talking to each other, and they are swearing a blue streak, saying pretty dirty stuff. And
All in Russian.
All in Russian, and they're just to themselves in the area, and I kind of walk by, and then I said something in response in Russian, and they just looked at me like I was a ghost, that they just saw me go. They're just like,
is this?
What? like, what? I'm like, да, я знаю по-русски. And they're like, oh, well, I guess, and they're just kind of caught off guard by it.
What does that mean? It's an explicit podcast. We can say whatever we want.
No, I know it is, but it's going to be weird for me to swear.
Oh, okay. All right, fair enough.
I swore in last episode.
Yeah.
Well, it's not so much the swearing; it's about the actual vulgarities of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but that's what I'm more worried about. But at that point, it didn't even matter. There was one time when I went to go cover the Olympics, I got into a fight with a Russian reporter because it was a crazy mix zone. I never told you this story?
No, let's hear this.
Okay, so National radio broadcast, first time we all go to send, like, Rogers Radio sends like 14 reporters, and I was very new, so I got all the sports that Canada didn't get a medal in, which was not very many. But so I was covering cross country skiing, and I'm interviewing Sarah Renner. And in this event, everyone finishes at different times, so it's a big mix zone when you cover an Olympics for broadcast media.
Right.
So you're fighting with TV and radio reporters, and you're kind of like trying to.
So they don't section you off.
And you're all like in a herd like cattle, and you have like volunteers there who will try and get your athlete to stop, or you do, but they don't have to.
If it's anything like a World Junior mix zone,
it's
which I've been a part of,
like that.
It's utter chaos.
It's bad.
Utter chaos.
Just for people like laymen like myself. Okay, if you're at a scrum in the NHL, do they separate the TV and the radio, or is it a little bit more?
No, it's usually all together. But everyone has a cordiality with them that they'll be able to just, make a perfect circle, and everyone gets what they need.
I'm just getting the sense that this more like a red carpet, like, because I've done red carpets where you're like, no.
I mean, if you ever walk, like, if you ever cut like TIFF, pretty much, where they stop, they have handlers who will gear you in directions, but they don't have to stop, and everyone wants different people, and that's exactly what it's like.
Okay,
so it's very similar, minus the paparazzi.
Okay,
so I mean, there's photographers, but it's not as crazy. So what happened was I'm interviewing Sarah Renner. She's finished I think it was like her last Olympics ever. And I'm interviewing. You only get about 90 seconds with each person. That's supposed to be the cap. As I'm interviewing her, I just feel this huge camera whack me in the back of the head. Ooh. And instead of any sort of apology, it was a guy with his camera woman saying, "You have to go, my athlete is coming." And I'm like, what the heck was that?
Yeah.
What is going on here? Even Sarah Renner is kind of looking all like, what is going on?
Oh, you were in the middle of the interview.
Yeah. I was in the middle of the interview, but luckily in radio you can edit it.
Yes.
Yeah,
and that's key to the end of this story. So what happened was I finished my interview. I'm steaming after she left, and this guy's doing his interview, and to the camera when I go, you know what, because you were so nice during my interview, hitting me in the back of the head, I should be equally as nice during yours. At this point she acts like she doesn't know English at all. So, I'm glad this is an explicit podcast, by the way, because now this is the most explicit I'm going to get.
Oh, okay.
So
when the reporter comes to ask the next question to bring the mic to his face, I lean into the microphone and yell, "Jopt for your mat," which means go fuck your mom.
What?
I know that, by the way.
That's amazing. So you're a champ, my friend. That's amazing.
So the cameraman or camerawoman stops dead in her tracks. The reporter looks at me all stunned like a deer in the headlights. The athlete is also like, what's going on? Kind of staring at me. And the Uzbekistan reporters, the Kazakhstan reporters, the Belarusians, and the Latvians, all the Russian breakup countries that know the language, because there's a lot of them, are laughing their ass off. Like in that mix-up.
It's about to go down.
They could not believe what had just happened. And because that was key, with mine, I could edit it. They had to start over. And I don't even know if they were able to get the full 90 seconds. So at that point, I'm like, I better get out of here. So I'm running out, and there's the print mix zone is further down. Broadcast goes first. Kevin McGran at the Toronto Star is where I really got to know Kevin McGran really well before the Leaf job. I'm sprinting out of there, and he sees me running. He's like, "Dave, like, what's the mess going on over there?" I explained to him the story. He goes, "No, you didn't." I'm like, "Yes, I did, and I'm going to go hide in the CTV truck now." Because I just didn't want anyone to come find me, but I also had to go there to file my story.
Right.
Like, I actually we were using the CTV trucks to send our audio back.
Right, because it was a joint partnership. It was CTV for television, Rogers for radio,
Yeah, and so all different kinds of different spread. And so I ran over there, did my thing, and then when I was done, I looked out the portables and where all those TV trucks were. Coast was clear, and I got back in that story. I think I've told for like the 30th, 35th time. But I remember over beers and Whistler talking about that story. Someone from a French publication published it as a story, like heard stories from whatever, but didn't put my name to it. But yeah, but that was the That was what happened.
Well, luckily no one listens to this podcast. only a couple thousand people.
No, but it was. No, I mean, now it's okay. It's like one of those things where you've done the time, enough time has passed. It's like if you actually incorrectly did your taxes after 7 years, they can't do anything.
Right.
There you go.
Not applying anything. I'm just saying. So I mean, that's what it was. But that's where Russians come in handy. Nick Kuleman's an example of someone who actually knows English better than he gives off.
Oh,
and so even when I talk Russian to him, he's like, duh, like he'll be very calm and quiet about it.
Like he doesn't speak Russian.
No, but I remember helping because he scored his first goal, and I can't remember which writer it was. I was in that room, and I helped kind of translate what it meant for him to score his first goal because they wanted that reaction. They couldn't get it because no one knew Russian. I remember, I know Russian, so I thought that might help in terms of, like Sochi and stuff like that. And who knows? You never know, right? So
it should.
Yeah, well, you hope
know
so.
The native language.
Yeah, but who knows?
Pretty important.
Now, I know you got to get rolling here because David is actually going down to City to do sports tonight.
I'm doing the TV thing, which is why it's one of the rare situations where I'm clean shaven.
Yeah,
I noticed that. That was weird.
Yeah. You look like a human being who woke up and had a good, healthy day. It's crazy.
Yeah, or like a 19-year-old. It's weird. It's weird for me, but with the more camera stuff, it might, with Sportsnet, with cross promotion, there's always situations where we might, they want that, and the beard can kind of look messy if you don't keep it up. So for certain situations,
rugged.
I like rugged. Eric Smith rocks it on Sportsnet 360. He's one of the few that's allowed to wear the beard, but I think that's because he never wants to not have a beard. Like, I think he's like married to it. So
it's his thing. It's his shtick, right?
It's become his thing. For me, I'll take whatever I can get at this point, and then, once you feel you can kind of make those kind of moves, you then go ahead. You win.
Eric makes a beard look good. Now, I do want to quickly ask you before you do go. Now, we'll obviously check in if we can.
Yeah.
Over spring training. Jeez, I keep saying
it's okay.
that.
It's
over
the voice of summer.
It's
training camp.
Training camp. And into the season and
fall training.
Without having exactly. Why doesn't anybody call it fall training, Dan?
It feels like fall training to me.
We want to know, without the Leafs hitting the ice, you obviously have probably seen Steve's tweets about what he thinks is going to happen with the Leafs this year.
Oh. Yes.
So you think we're in a bit of a you think, Steve, that we're in a bit of a bind?
Yeah.
You guys are in a difference of opinion of where the Leafs will finish?
Well, I mean, for me, I'm more of a fan, right? I'm a top 40 DJ. I follow entertainment. I'm a huge Leafs fan. For
so
me,
are you saying mainstream music, mainstream
hockey?
That's totally like a backhanded insult. I apologize.
It's okay. I'm used to it from you sports guys who think you're all better than us. Okay,
we are.
We get made fun of. Hey, we get made fun of online as mainstream media.
Yeah. There you go.
So
for me,
and I'm a basement blogger.
From my limited opinion, my opinion is that I think the Leafs are going to have a good year this year. Do they have cap problems coming in 3 to 4 years? Absolutely.
They have cap problems now.
Yeah.
Cap problems in 3 to 4 weeks.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, is there some issues coming? Sure, but every team's got some sort of issue. At least our ownership isn't an issue. My question to you is, what do you see from the Leafs this year? Having seen nothing, and your opinion can change as soon as training camp starts.
To tell you the truth, I do think they are going to be a wild card struggling team.
Okay.
We have to call it wild card now because you can't say 7 to 8 anymore because it's not done that way with the new division alignment and playoffs.
That's right. Yeah.
So I do think that they will be one of those wild card struggling kind of teams, just because. Look, that year is impossible to evaluate. It's impossible to take a lot of that year and say that team earned it. The one team you can say that about, ironically, because it's usually not the case, is the team that ended up winning the cup. Because they were so dominant during the season that the only thing right about the shortened season was the cup winner. Because they did dominate in the regular season and did deserve to win the Stanley Cup, even though the path towards the end was kind of weird. They got the job done. But that's the only team you can kind of say over the course of that little stretch that really played out to where you expected, because there were a lot of unexpecteds in that situation. No one thought Philly was not going to make the playoffs.
Right.
In that situation.
They were horrible. That was weird.
They were beyond bad. Devils struggle. Another perennial team. But now that's the one team that may struggle for years to come now. But there's a lot of teams that kind of were in the mix or on the bubble and might have had an off year, or you could at least chalk it up to an off year.
Or would have had time to recover had there been that extra 30 games.
Right, and even the Leafs were starting to dip towards the end of the 48 games. Who knows if they would have had another 18-wheeler going off a cliff? We don't know.
Which they had done the season before, right? They had a great first 48.
Hey, that's the only reason I reference it that way. If one thing, Brian Burke gave us great reference points. There's that, there's one, and there's a whole bunch of other ones.
Actually, one quick one before you go.
Yeah.
What was it like the day Brian Burke was fired? Because I was completely floored.
I will tell you a great story.
Okay.
All right.
All your stories are great.
I'm in Montreal, as a lot of people were, because it was the day before their excursion for Montreal, because they'd just come from Chicago. I had the fun little plan of flying from Chicago to Toronto to take a train to Montreal instead of getting a direct flight. That's a whole other story.
Okay.
This was a long day for me already. I get in, and they have the practice Friday. And it's a regular routine practice, it seems. They're doing it out in Montreal's practice facility. And then for the one time, me, Tony Ambrosio, who's a fine human being, and Mike Brophy, also another fine human being who was writing for Sportsnet.ca at the time. The three of us do a Sportsnet night at the Keg, for whatever reason. Well beyond my radio budget, but I thought, you know what? The one time, fine. So we're having dinner in old Montreal, and we're just filling ourselves with the steak or whatever we all had. It was, that feeling you have when you stuff yourself after a place like that. Mm-hmm. You don't want to work.
When you got to control your breaths.
Yeah, but you don't want to work. The last thing you want to do is get all in a fluster and work.
Yeah.
I look down on my phone and I see a note, and I'm like, damn it. And they're like, what? I'm like,
so this is at night?
Yeah, it was Friday night when the news broke that Wilson got Ron Wilson. Oh, sorry, we're talking about Brian Burke.
Yeah. Well, sorry, no. Finish your Wilson story.
Wilson.
You know what? I totally went 180 and did the Ron Wilson getting fired.
No, now you got to do both.
We're in it.
So, fair, absolutely fair. So I do that one.
I was like, whoa, he got a scoop? How did you know that far ahead?
No. But I remember there was that, and then there was, and then it became a whole stock the Leafs Lowe's hotel. In Montreal at that point. We just were stalking the hotel, getting a phone call from my boss an hour after. Yeah, I'm already here. They're like, okay, good. Just checking. All right. And I'm like, yep, we're all here. And then we get a video. There were only three of us that actually caught Carlisle taking a side door into the hotel. And I think my TMZS kind of video hit 17,000 views.
You're the one who posted that video.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
I've seen that.
So so it is kind of like the paparazzi sometimes.
Yeah, sadly. I don't want to be that guy, but sometimes when you have to be everything. You have to wear all hats. And that's why it's so hard to get guys to understand that. And you want to be writing all the feel good stories, but when they're playing like shit, you have to put it out there. Mm-hmm. And you can warn the guy, say, look, I'm writing this piece about your numbers or whatever. I just want you to know that so you don't get all angry or whatever.
Right.
This is, we're just doing it because of where the team is right now. And most guys get it. Some, they'll be upset, but they'll get over it. It's just because you're just compounding to their already bad mood. Everyone's human.
Right.
But they just make a lot of money.
So, Ron Wilson, you're filling your gullet.
Yeah.
And
and then I look at that, I see Ron Wilson's been fired. So the last thing I wanted to do was work on a Friday night in Montreal.
Nothing like doing an interview with the meat sweats.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that was my first experience actually having to ask tough questions to Brian Burke. In terms of the real tough questions in a press conference setting. And so one of them was Frank, because he was talking about the coaching staff, because Zettler was also reassigned. Was Francois Allaire ever considered as one of the guys who's going to be moved? That was one of the questions. There was, what was the timeline for this? Because he did say that, I know the topic du jour is Ron Wilson, but he is safe. The very same day he was meeting with Randy Carlisle. Because when Randy Carlisle gave us a timeline, Tuesday when they first met. Oh, I remember what he said Tuesday, so you can't tell me, that, but that's whatever. But that's not necessarily covering up to protect whatever. That's him actively, because we didn't ask him that question yet and he put it out there. So, there was all these kind of things. So, when Brian Burke got fired, that one really caught us off guard because there was no real rhyme or reason. We kind of knew, but we kind of didn't know. The timing of it was the most bizarre thing ever.
Well, he just got an extension, less than 30 games prior.
It wasn't even so much that. It was the first day or two with the doors opening officially to the season.
And they could have let him go in November. I mean, they could have let him go anytime.
I don't think they could have done it during the lockout because
now we're talking about Burke.
Yes. Now we're talking about Burke.
Confused.
Yeah, sorry. We're moving to Burke.
The thing about Ron Wilson is that ended pretty quickly because no one's been able to even spot Ron Wilson. He's kind of disappeared off the map.
He's like Bigfoot, yeah.
But with Burke, it was a whole different thing where he came out to put out his own news conference later that week and was very adversarial in terms of some of his other responses and was trying to be politically, that he was okay with it. But there were certain situations like saying, I wish they would have let me know before I go to Russia. And, pointing out these kind of things about his dismissal. And it's kind of a shame because the actual relationship I was starting to have with Brian Burke was actually becoming one as that was happening because he didn't know really who I was. The hardest part is when you're new.
Right.
And so, I started to get to know him a little bit more during the lockout when I was at Marlies games and seeing him there and talking to him. And, we were talking and he was being more forthcoming about stuff like the whole Jake Gardner stuff and the concussion that he had with the Marlies in December and stuff like that. So, one day, I mean, if you look hard enough, there's a lot of hints that are mostly true. A lot of them are false about why Brian Burke got dismissed.
Now,
but the point is, when you have a news conference about it, I remember the question I asked was, without putting him on the spot, look, we know you, when Dave Notice was there, we know you and Brian Burke are very close. Usually when there's a change, it's necessitated for a reason or another. So that being said, what do you bring different that Brian Burke didn't? Yeah. Because that's what everyone's trying to figure out right now. And so he kind of alluded to the fact that he's a little bit more of a patient person, and that's kind of been true. But
you think so?
I mean, in terms of
maybe to that point it had been.
Well, I mean, he hadn't done anything.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, yeah.
No, but I mean, in terms of letting the young guys come up and not just paying the guys who are like on the roster play.
Okay.
And those kind of things, and then just letting things kind of play out. And then seeing what he could get. Look, he has been patient because he's not rushing to sign Phil Kessel to an extension or Dion Phaneuf.
Sign Lupul.
That was a good move, though.
That actually was a good move.
That was a very good move. Look at the value you're getting for someone who's going to be productive when he plays.
You imagine if you had to sign him this summer?
What's that?
You imagine if you had to sign him to an extension?
You would tack on at least another mil.
Yep.
Yeah.
At least.
Oh, they got great value.
They got a great value for him.
Lupul getting over 6.
Think about that. But to get 5.25 for that, an only $1 million increase when you look at some of the other guys, and granted, yeah, he's got the injury issues, but his actual, he is the quintessential captain of this team in a lot of ways, even though he doesn't wear the C.
Mm-hmm. I would call him the fans' captain. I don't know if that's fair, but
I think he commands a lot of respect in the room as well.
Okay. Yes,
but,
of course.
But I just mean, like, the way he's elevated his game, he's made no bones about it. And, with the Brian Burke situation, it was tough. We never will really get the full answer there from either side. And
what do you think?
I can't really say it because...
Okay, fair enough.
Because... Whether it's true or whether it's not, and what we know and what we don't know, we have to stay away from it because, as the guy who had this job before me learned the hard way when being sued, was you can be right about the situation, but if no one's there to corroborate it, you will get destroyed.
Right. Okay, because our job is conjecture, your job is actual fact.
So. No, but I'm just saying. I mean, you can't. If no one's there to corroborate or you don't have a physical proof to bring to the table, that person can go right back out and call slander on you easy.
Without mentioning the name of the person being sued that you are talking about, I have it on good authority that he was right.
Yeah, for the most part, but I don't know that for sure.
No, me neither.
Yeah.
Me neither.
But
who are we talking about around this subject?
Who are we talking about?
And nobody even knows what the situation is. Everybody's like, okay, landmine.
This is we talked about this a few episodes ago. It's one of those things that you shan't speak about it, but like just everyone seems to know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's one of the unsaid truths. Now, David Alter, I know you've got to go.
Sure.
But I just want to say first off, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Pleasure.
And giving us your time because we know that you're a busy guy. We hope to keep in contact with you throughout the season.
You got my number, or at least Steve Dangle does.
Yeah, and we'll give you a shout.
I'll post it on Twitter.
And what
okay,
is
good. Good. That's exactly what I need. I already get enough calls from the immigration law office.
Yeah.
because the lawyer that represents not immigration, sorry, refugee law office. I guess a top lawyer that represents refugees has like a number one off mine. So when there's when there's a deadline, I get tons of calls. Is this the refugee law office? I'm just like kind of sick of that right now. So, yeah,
that's awesome. Well, what is your Twitter so people can follow you?
At David Alter 590. And it's been fun. I had like 500 followers before I got this job, and now I'm almost at 8. I'm nowhere in Steve Dangle territory. Adam,
need to get you
how many
there.
Twitter followers do you have?
I've got like 5,800, man.
That's pretty good.
I moved around the country so much that it's a wonder that I even have as much as I have, and I think I have to actually stay at a radio station for more than a year for that to actually
traction.
grow. Yeah, so
I'd appreciate that if you did that as a friend of yours. Like,
So you're saying if I covered the Calgary Flames, I would actually have a difficult time with my Twitter
well,
following?
I think Calgary's Twitter, they're not as intense, and there aren't as many Calgarians as there are Torontonians.
That's
so
very true.
When you're in Toronto, your follower account blows up just because there's just more people here.
well, you'd start tweeting stuff about Curtis Glencross, and a bunch of Calgary people
Well,
would
I'm
follow
sure they
you.
don't play Alan Frew's Canada's team song. There,
Oh yeah, you have what's the stat on that?
well, I only took it the year before.
Oh, okay.
But they actually played it twice last year and did not win either game this year. They did do it twice.
So your stat, just to put some
They
context,
did win
is
one time.
Okay,
at
what
the end of
is
the
this?
year.
Put this into context for me.
The Leafs never win except for that one time that you're referencing when Free to Be is played before the game.
Really?
Like, yeah, in the arena before the game starts.
This is Canada's team.
And it was it was just a joke thing that I started the first 4 games of the season when they were actually doing well. But when they only played it the 4 times, they had like a record of 0-3-1. And the only reason I was able to check that was because I got some app for my Twitter that historically checks anytime I referenced it. So I referenced it every time because I just did not like it being on there. No disrespect to Alan Frew intended. It's just my feeling about the song.
Sure.
So it's out there, and and I'm just like, wow. So then the losing streak happens at home, and they're playing it every night. It got to the point where there were even Leaf staffers above me in the press box that are like not the main decision making people, but
Brian Burke going, oh no!
But the some staff there, all of a sudden I'd hear the music. You'd hear dun-dun-dun, the first guitar, the first guitar strums, and one of the guys who works closely with the Maple Leafs, I just remember him slamming the desk, going, "Damn it!" And then I look back because he's right in front of me. I look back. He goes, "Don't you tweet it? Don't you tweet it?"
That's
and
awesome.
This guy is a very intimidating fellow. Like when you look at him. So,
but he's not Brian Burke.
No, and at that point, I'm just like,
oh, I think I know who this might be.
Yes. At that point, I'm just like, okay, so I'm like, McGran, can you tweet this? so that's pretty much what I did in that respect. But and I just kind of retweeted him there. So I just thought it was a pretty funny request. And you know what? When the team was losing, there were some, they're not in as great of a mood because they're employed by the team. They want to see the team do well. And I guess you got to be a little bit more sensitive to the situation. But there were times where I would get emailed being like, "Why'd you tweet that?" or "This is not right," or whatever.
Really?
It was just because. I don't know. At that point, they're trying to do their job and they're trying to put more positive spin on it. It's tough.
If they did their job, they'd win.
No, I'm talking about the staff, PR, and all that kind of stuff. It has nothing to do with it.
Okay, well, good.
Yeah.
And David Alter, I thank you so much for coming on.
Hey,
your stories are awesome.
Yeah, I hope I didn't bury the well.
No,
I hope I have more.
No, I
don't want to be that guy who in the first episode gets amazing, right, and then you come back with nothing.
I have a feeling that there will be many more great stories.
I'm glad I could contribute to this.
I don't think your stories are going to be an 18-wheeler going off the edge of a cliff. No,
even if the Leafs are, actually your stories will get better if that happens.
I hope so. But I just got to watch my mouth too.
Yes, that's true. Follow David Alter on Twitter and all season because he's the guy that follows the Leafs for Sportsnet 590 The Fan. David Alter, thank you so much for coming on. We're going to let you go to City and do your sports.
All right, thanks. Is it just a walk-off or?
Well, we can, basically you can just walk right out of the room.
I'm going to walk right out.
Podcast.
You guys are going to do your show.
It's a good thing you don't live stream.
You're going to hear my voice faintly
Don't forget your suit.
Yeah, I got it. Hey, I need that.
He's got a nice suit from
Oh,
Morse.
geez.
I'm easily distracted.
I was about to say, are you wearing that green shirt because they'll just see right through you on TV? Yeah.
I'm gonna take. It's not a green screen, thank God. My chest would be showing football highlights. See you later.
See you later. David Alter from Sportsnet 590, The Fan. Wow, that was... How fun is he?
He's a beauty. I know him from, I talked about it earlier, my intern days at the Fan 590. And I used to have his old job. When you were a more senior intern at the Fan, they usually offered an interview to be the writer, which is really producer, for RBC Junior Hockey Magazine.
Okay.
Which is a show hosted by TSN's Gino Retta. He just used to record it at Elise Studios. I don't think he does anymore. And he used to be the guy for that, and then I did it in the 08-09 season. So I got to cover Eberle's golden goal, and I got to talk to him. Or not golden goal. Eberle's 5.4 goal. John Tavares. A lot of guys. All the stars.
There was a lot of stars on that team.
Braden Shen, Cody Hodgson. It was a big year. I hope I can one day be alongside the great David Alter.
Well, we hope so too. Actually, it would certainly make this podcast better, Steve. So,
what you're saying is I need to pick up the slack.
No, not at all.
No, it's fine.
So we're going to switch gears to the...